Is it? Yeah.
We are going to open to the floor at some stage when it becomes
Necessary.
when it becomes wildly obvious. As an interviewer, I'm a great pastry chef. Hammer Boys was my favourite song on the record the first time I heard it, and I went from.
It's like we're on a talk show.
This is it was just from a fan's perspective. I went from somehow thinking it was about your father to someone completely different. Isn't it odd how people can get things wrong?
Well, it is, but that's the beauty of a song. It's like you can interpret it however you want. And in a certain way, the beginning part of it did have an aspect of me thinking back to the neighborhood where I grew up or something like that. Although I wasn't trying to put my finger too much on what it was about in particular, but I mean, I love that about songs is that you can, there used to be this one, you can hear lyrics and you hear them the way you want to hear them sometimes, We always used to tease Thurston about this one Wings song. How does it go? Ketchup, soup and puree. That one. Don't get left behind. It's an early Wings song, probably before all of your time. But Thurston used to have his own version of the lyrics to that. And every time he'd sing it, we'd be like, dude, you have the lyrics completely wrong. You don't have any idea. And he was like, my whole childhood growing up, I thought those were the lyrics. And it's like, so for him they were.
You bastard. You couldn't just leave him to those childhood. That's a hell of a door. We really should do something about that. Now, when we spoke to each other a couple of weeks ago, and I said, well, look, I'm probably not going to ask the typical questions because you answer them so well, and anyone who's into what you do and what the band does, you've answered kind of why we're here and what's going on. So I did want to ask you, firstly, were you the best George Harrison impressionist at primary school? Because I was shocked by that when I first heard it.
We did have a small crew of kids in elementary school who thought we were the Beatles on the playground every day, running around from one imaginary group of girls to the next. Yeah, Mad Caper. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. I don't know if that has a particular answer or not.
Well, the other, when I first found out that you followed the Grateful Dead quite a bit, and I don't know if you can go into classification of being a Deadhead, but I was really shocked by it. And then a couple of days later, I was completely thrilled by it because I don't want to get personal on this, but I found you an incredibly bohemian, intimidating presence to me because you'd say you were going to see things that I'd never heard of. And then we were just sitting around and we were talking about the Grateful Dead, and I thought, fuck, this is, the world's opened up. And then reading more about, with the ideas for open tunings, if not directly to the Sonics, but that it was from Joni Mitchell records, John Fay records, Reverend Gary Davis.
Yep.
Which...
Yep. I started out as an acoustic guitar player, and I've always been an acoustic guitar player. I've been through 20 or 30 years now where, mostly people know me as a electric noisician.
Terrorist.
Yeah, noisician. And, I did go through a long phase of being really into the Grateful Dead. And, I was kind of thinking about it, and in a way, I've always had this great love of, bands, a real band. To me, a band is a group where everybody's name in the group. It's not just so and so and the backing group. It's Mike and Mickey and Davey and Peter, or whatever it is. It's the Rolling Stones aren't just Mick Jagger and some other dudes. Charlie's behind the kid and all that stuff. And I've always been really interested in bands that presented a multitude of views. So, yeah, John, Paul, and George, three singers presenting three different views, or, the Grateful Dead kind of in the similar boat. My band did a cover of a Fleetwood Mac song recently for some kind of a tribute record, and they were another band that had all these different singers presenting all these different points of view. So almost song by song on the record, you'd get a different perspective. So you got all these faceted views. But at the same time, I've always been really into, since I was a young man, the idea of a solo artist, that when you listen to their record, whether it's Joni or David Crosby or Neil Young or Dylan or Leonard Cohen, you kind of, or, more recent progeny like Cat Power or Bill Callahan or yourself, or or Connor Oberst or somebody like that. You're kind of, you feel like when you listen to a solo artist, the magic aspect of it is that you kind of open a door into somebody's world, and you kind of get a sense of who this person is at a particular point in time. And if there's somebody that really captivates you, you kind of follow them along. And every time they put out a record, it's kind of like when you used to get a postcard from your friend or something like that. It's like, okay, this is where Leonard Cohen is at right now, or whatever, or Sean Marshall or whatever. And there's something really special about that. And I always wanted to make a record like that. And so when this record started to come about, and it came about in the most like casually offhand circumstance. I wasn't really even thinking about making a record like this when these songs started to fall out, and I was really kind of hoping anyway that it would have a little bit of that quality of I really wanted to. When I was working on the lyrics, I've been. You were talking about writing about poetry recently, and I've been writing a lot of like very, very abstract, like surrealist kind of poetry the last few years. And at one point when I was getting these songs together, I thought, well, I'll just pull some of that stuff and make lyrics. And then I was like, no, I really want these lyrics to be much more personal and, much more about, maybe to some degree what's going on in my life right now.
Or as cold and impersonal as Stranded, which has no emotion to it whatsoever.
Yeah, well, that's why that one was so hard, because it is kind of super personal, like a love song or whatever. And, that's not expected of someone like me in a way, so it was kind of hard to
which is
present
what I want to get to. But isn't it wonderful, everyone here, to gain admittance to here, to buy the record, to be here, so that if those of you who haven't lived with the record for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, have that experience. I love that feeling that people here hearing these songs. I hadn't heard them played like this either, and loving the record more each day. And go home, and you probably go home and put it on, and you probably fuck to it as well.
That would be a high compliment. That would be a high compliment.
See, isn't that nice?
All of these songs started out as acoustic guitar songs, and in a way, the way the whole thing started. Maybe I told you this in an email. Is I was asked in the summer of 2010 by a friend of mine in France to play at this festival, and they were like, the only thing we ask is that it has to be an all acoustic show. And I was telling this to somebody the other day. I think this is 2010. I think the last acoustic show I did was when you and I did sets at the Cooler in New York, like in the early 90s or something like that.
Swinging meat hooks above us.
Yeah, it was called the Cooler because it used to be a meat rack place. Yeah, but that was, I think, probably the last time I'd ever deigned to try and do an acoustic show. And these guys asked me to do this show, and I thought, all right. Finally, I was like, the money was good. So I thought, all right, I'll do it. And I really thought I would just play like, a lot of Sonic Youth songs, the ones that I sing anyway, started on acoustic guitar. And I thought I would just do some covers and some Sonic Youth covers. And as I was preparing for this show, this song called Lost kind of popped out. And, it might be strange to say, having done so many records with Sonic Youth, but like it popped out, almost fully formed, like lyrics and chords in one of the tunings from one of the Sonic Youth songs I was practicing. And like 2 weeks later, I was playing it on stage, and I started the show with it. And I was like, well, that'll be bold. I'll start the show with this new song. And there was something magical about the fact that like 2 weeks ago, this song didn't exist at all. And then 2 weeks later, I was playing it in front of like a few thousand people or something like that. And this was like June or July of 2010, and I was really, at that time, Sonic Youth wasn't doing a lot of stuff. It wasn't, all this turmoil that later came out with Thurston and Kim, it wasn't evident at that time. We were just like in this downtime. We built in a lot of downtime around the band so people could do their own projects or whatever. And I was just having so much fun all summer, just like reacquainting myself with the idea of like sitting in the living room with an acoustic guitar and just like, wow, this instrument sounds great. And then like picking up another one, like, man, this one has a completely different character and sounds great. And just like that, the kind of thing that when you first started playing guitar, I mean, for me anyway, that was half the fun, was like, wow, I'm making something beautiful come out of this like little wooden box. And all these songs started to spill out, and I really thought I was just going to make, like, all right. At some point, I was like, all right, I really do have a bunch of songs here. I'll make a, acoustic guitar and voice record. I'll just go into the studio and like lay this stuff down and be done with it. And I started playing it, and Steve was around in the studio, and our engineer Aaron, and they were both like really encouraging of what I was doing. And to me, this is like such a weird thing at this point in my life to make a record like this, that I was kind of feeling a little insecure about it, and they were like encouraging me. And I asked Steve to play on a couple songs, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden, it sort of built up into mostly a kind of a band record. But I really love the fact that like all the songs can exist in all these different settings. They could exist as just, I've played them solo acoustic. I've played them in this kind of setting a few different times. And
I was really taken by it. And why that you give me such joy as just a fan is that because within the space of a year of seeing each other, that you'd done the contre-jour exhibition with now the expression, some people would say flying guitar in front of insulation. But it was suspended instrument.
I call it suspended guitar phenomenon. I do this project with my wife, Leah Singer, where I have an electric guitar suspended from a cord in the middle of a room. It's kind of like a theatrical thing. It's in the round, and I'm in the center with this guitar hanging from this cord, and I'm playing with bow and sort of swinging it around, and it can go and it swings over the audience's head in this big arc, and I've got sort of amps set up so that when it swings by the amps, it kind of catches some feedback and stuff. And Leah's got like big screens, like 2 big movie screens here and then one on the other side. So you're kind of, the audience is kind of all around in a circle, and I'm in the center and the screens are behind them. And, it's just kind of a cool thing. And that's what I was really concentrating on when this stuff just popped out.
And then when I saw you and the Bowery Ballroom, you came and said, I just had this great day. We had John Medeski down, and Nell's playing this, and Alan was, absolutely going out. And so he was in the band, and then there's this swinging guitar thing with the projection, and and the solo acoustic thing going on. And then I hear about the exhibition in Paris. Maybe it wasn't more than a couple of years ago with the drawings.
Yeah, well, there was one recently in Brussels just a couple months ago. But I still keep doing visual art. I'm kind of doing a lot of different stuff. But I don't know. It's kind of funny because I don't know. When I was a kid, the things that really interested me were like music and words and visual stuff, and those 3 elements of those 3 kind of streams have still kind of carried along. So I'm still doing visual art, I'm still writing stuff, and I'm still trying to make music, and I'm kind of happy about the fact that those things can kind of bounce off each other, and I haven't really sort of set myself in just one of those streams as much.
With that in mind as well, because, and excuse me cutting you off, but there's kind of quite pastoral references in the lyrics on this record about getting out on the road. I know that the trip you did from East Coast to West Coast when you were 18 was a really big deal, because we used to talk about it years ago.
Yeah.
And on this record as well, and in Leah's projections, maybe I'm reading too much into it.
Maybe not.
But don't answer your door if someone knocks tonight. Her projections behind the contre-jour stuff. There was kids in a city, and it would jump to a very pastoral scene. Mm-hmm. And we're both avid bike riders who both live in cities.
Yep.
And I don't know whether it's a statement or a question, but you could.
Well, to me, it's like.
Aren't we fascinated?
I try and balance a lot of stuff, but at this point with this record, obviously Sonic Youth is this really unique thing. There's something that we do that that the 4 of us make happen, and while any of us individually might have elements of that when we go away and do our own thing, there wasn't even any notion of trying to make a record that had a Sonic Youth-like quality or anything like that. I wanted to make a record that had a very different quality, and that's like the pastoral thing. That pull. You're living in the city, like thinking about the country. That kind of pull is always there. Like having a family, and then having a crazy life on the road as a traveling musician. It's like in a certain way, it's like balancing all that stuff is pretty important, and it's pretty important to me to keep all that stuff in the mix as far as the material that I'm working with.
That association with the town that you live in New York, but you are quite close to huge parks and not far out of the way of the country that you can actually get out of there. Mm-hmm. Has been evidence as my daughter's on a bus speeding away to upstate New York to go to a wonderful big park at the moment.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
The Text of Light, I know we have some members of the Text of Light here tonight. Is it the right opportunity to talk about the show a little bit? Yeah,
we can talk about that. It's kind of fun that the Melbourne Festival asked us to come and do a couple different things here. They wanted me to play with my band, and they also wanted Text of Light to come down and play. And there's a friend of ours down here named Lawrence who's been trying to bring Text of Light for a while, and we finally managed to get it together. And Alan and Tim, who was on percussion on the side, and Uli Krieger is also kicking around here somewhere playing sax. So the four of us do this improvisational music with abstract films by this American master named Stan Brakhage, and so we're going to do that tomorrow night at the ACMI. Is that what it's called?
It's fucking Boss Joint.
Yeah. It's a beautiful place. And then the next night we'll do an electric show with Tim and Steve and Alan, the band that was here tonight, and maybe we'll coax some of those other guys up on stage for that one as well. But again, it's it's like different poles. It's like in New York, when we first started Sonic Youth, there were all these improvisers, like downtown improviser scene, like John Zorn and stuff like that, and we were so dead set on like not being a part of that scene. We really wanted to have a rock band, and especially like a no wave kind of rock band, inspired by all the things that were knocking us out at the time. But after a while we kind of opened up a little bit to that. So by the early 90s a lot of us were doing improvisational gigs, and there was this whole pool of people in New York to play with, and Text of Light kind of came out of that. Our friend Uli was coming over from Germany and wanted to do some shows, and Alan and I said, like, well, let's try to do something with film. And I'd already been doing film stuff with Leah, and I love, for improv music anyway, I really love having something, improvers kind of sit there like this with their head down, and there's not a whole lot of stuff to watch, so it was kind of fun to add another element and put these films in, especially by this guy Stan Brakhage. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's an American avant-garde filmmaker from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and he's every bit as master in his field as whatever famous artist in some other field you'd want to mention, and yet he's still unknown because it's a really obscure sort of byway of cinema in a certain way. It has to do a lot with it's cinema that's closer to poetry and abstract painting than it is narrative cinema. It doesn't have any narrative to it at all. Actually, I think the films we're going to play with here are all hand painted, where he's literally putting little daubs of color on the strips of film and then running them through the projector. And he did stuff like tape wings of moths to a very famous film of his called Mothlight, where he literally found, had all these moths dying outside of his house on, falling into the light, and he pulled off all the wings and taped them down to the film, and what you're watching is just the light going through the wings, these gossamer wings of these moths. It's pretty amazing stuff, and so for us it's kind of fun to present his films in a certain way, as well as a part of what we do.
I love reading what Alan was talking about, and forgive me for not quoting verbatim and perhaps misrepresenting, but that the music isn't presented as soundtracks to these films at all.
Right. He has, Stan Brakhage has so many films. Like, we're playing with 2 films tomorrow. I've never seen them before. Yep. I'm not going to see them prior to playing with them. We basically present them as a separate event happening at the same time. We're just improvising, and basically we use the films. The only way we really use the films is like if the films are 55 minutes long, that's kind of how long our set is. And if there's 4 films and they're each 10 minutes long, we kind of know, okay, maybe there's 4 10-minute movements or something like that. But we're not trying to illustrate them like, use the classic thing where, you're watching a film and the guy slips on the banana peel and the orchestra goes, it's not like that at all. It's more just like we're presenting an improv performance, and at the same time in the best spirit of like sort of 60s happenings, there's something else happening at the same time. And anyway.
Briefly, I want to ask about, because I had mentioned that the Walking Men '99 cover of I haven't seen the installation myself, but the cover of Lee's record Between the Time and Tides has representation of Walking Men '99. That's the title of it. It's pictures of those walk signals at the traffic lights from 99 different cities around the world, and all the way they look in different cities. And they're each blown up to the size, like physical size of a real person, and they're on like 3 sides of a city block on these walls, like black walls with the looks like the little dots of those traffic lights. Was there talk that maybe you got inspiration to even push on with the record because you saw that image that was taken, that photo taken of you? Well, yeah. I was working on. No, it is true. I was working on these songs through the summer, and I had a few songs by the fall. And I wasn't at this point. I still didn't really think I was going to make an album, and I was doing an interview with these Canadians about this legendary Canadian noise band, and we were on our way to my studio, and we walked past this wall, and the photographer that was along took a couple pictures of me walking in front of these, they're pictures of like, those walking guys on the traffic lights, and he sent me the pictures, and I looked at this one, and I just thought like,
man, that's a freaking album cover, you know? And I was like, now I've got to make some more songs because here's the, you know, it really kind of happened like that. I was like, I had this picture and I thought like, this is such a cool album cover. I've got to finish, you know, I got to make the songs to go with it.
Thank God
in a way.
everything's going in the right time.
Yeah.
We're going to throw it open. If anyone's got a question I'd like to ask for Lee.
Okay.
I hear a lot of REM influence in this album. Is that just crazy or?
Well, you know, I think that you're not the first one to mention it, and I don't really hear it in the music, but Michael and I think, have similar timbres to our voice in a certain way, and you know, I think people have mentioned that aspect. I mean, you know, we've known those guys since Sonic Youth played our first show with a drummer in New York the same time they, you know, right after they had formed, they came up to New York, and we played together with each other in like 1981, and so we've been kind of good friends with those guys ever since. And you know, I've kind of dipped in and out of their music. I like some of it. I'm not so crazy about other aspects of it. This guy's yawning. That means it's time to stop. I'm only joking. I'm joking.
No. Marco, my friend, makes the best coffee in St Kilda, and he starts at 5 a.m.
Okay. Well, I want that coffee.
Yeah. Sort of.
But you know, so anyway, you know, we've been. I think it's more the vocal timbre than anything else.
Not so much the record, but definitely live. Neil Young, Crazy Horse.
Neil, yeah. Well, there's a couple things there that to me remind me of that, and you know, Neil's a huge love, and so you know, anything that sounds like that is due to being inspired by what he's done over 40 years or something like that. Steve and I are going to see Crazy Horse next month, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Did you ever write from the tour that Sonics did with Neil Young in '91?
Write from it?
Oh, right.
I wrote journal type stuff about it. Yeah.
Are they in
we
your
toured with
journals?
I don't think they are published actually. But we hung out with him. That's when we got to know him. We've kind of remained friends with him since then. Like, so if we're going to go see him next month, I hope that we'll get a chance to go back and say hi to him and hang out a little bit. It's funny because Neil is from Winnipeg, and Leah's from Winnipeg.
From Winnipeg?
Yeah. So with the first time that Neil and Leah went, they went off on this crazy conversation about Winnipeg. They was like talking about Canada for like 10 minutes. It was kind of funny. So every time we see him now, it's like they want to talk about old days in Winnipeg. But
Fight.
Wrestle? No.
That would be good.
So Lee, Shouts is about the Occupy Wall Street movement. Could you please elaborate a bit more on your personal experience within that movement, but also just what you think the correlation is more generally between social movements and music and the way they influence each other?
Well, it's a hard one to call because there's certainly, there's protest songs and there's music that intends to sort of be consciousness raising on one hand or another, and yet, I mean, music on a certain hand is straddling this line where it's entertainment on one hand. It's kind of, I've never, like with Sonic Youth, if we were ever asked about this kind of stuff, we always said like we really didn't write political movement music, except in the fact of like if you looked at the way we conducted our career in a sense, kind of like trying to be really independent and single-minded about what we intended to do and not be swayed by outside forces. Maybe that's in a certain sense a very personal type of political gesture. And, so, I mean, I wrote that song as a personal response to what was going on down there, not as a proselytizing kind of thing. I mean, I've been talking it up because I think it's an important movement to sort of support in a way. And, again, it's not a movement that's postulating specific plans for, next year's tax referendum or anything like that. It's talking about these, like, incredible long-range goals that, as a global public, we have to kind of be mindful of. So it's kind of like you're sitting on your shoulder like a conscience in a way. I think that's partly the main function of Occupy, is to be a conscience to the rest of the world and say, like, are you sure about this, about things that are happening in the world. And, I respect and admire people that can write very topical political songs, and I think it's a really hard thing to do and have it last. I mean, or at least to have it become a timeless song. I mean, Dylan's certainly written songs that are protest songs in the moment and timeless over a long period of time, but a lot of time stuff that's tied to a particular political situation kind of stays in that time period with it in a way, So I'm not...
I'm absolutely loving your album, and I'm wondering if I could borrow your plectrum.
My plectrum. Well, usually I don't know. We'll talk about it after the concert, after the conversation. Okay.
There has been a suggestion from the owners that Lee may be doing a signing afterwards, but we'll turn away for 5 seconds and then confirm that, so we can continue the conversation about the plectrum.
Thanks. We could probably do a couple more questions, and if there are any, or else we can all go have a drink and talk. I don't have a guitar set up for that one. I'm sorry. And anyway, I don't think they would be the neighbors would be very happy with more music at this point. It doesn't matter about the neighbors. That's easy for you to say.
Hey, despite all that, it's been a really special night. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks so much for coming. Hope to see some of you at one of the next couple nights of shows. And we'll be hanging around a little bit if anybody wants a record signed or anything like that.